Hey, welcome to the Flight Auditor channel. I'm here to give you a little insight on how I view exercising your First Amendment right and your Second Amendment rights, but this will be dedicated to the First Amendment, as a checklist as it compares to what a pilot looks at when I fly every time. Now, regardless of how well tuned you are and how experienced and how of an expert you are, it's always best to have a checklist. And when you jump aboard a commercial aircraft, I promise you, I guarantee you that every one of those pilots in those seats have a very thick written checklist that they go through before that aircraft pushes back. And as private pilots, we too have a checklist, not as thick, obviously, because more complex aircraft, the thicker the checklist. But these are things that you need to think about. And if you're going to do this in terms of exercising your First Amendment rights to either film in public or, be at a location and film the PD or whatever it might be, you need to know what you're looking to accomplish. Because there are people, that is, if you've looked at all the different channels that are out there, some people have been arrested. They've lost their freedom. It could be for a short time or a long-term time, depending on what that perceived charge is. You could lose any of your equipment or all of your equipment. And if you got $3,000 worth of equipment on your body and in your hand and somebody breaks it or it's taken from you, that's something that's not chump change by any stretch of the imagination. And God forbid, if you've got cash, or I know there's auditors that carry, gold coins and silver bars as a means of bailing themselves out. If there's no cash available, people always will, go for gold or silver. You need to be able to be prepared for that scenario. And then, of course, God forbid, if something happens to you or you're injured or it goes beyond being injured, maybe you need to defend yourself, what are you prepared to do? So I've prepared a 3-page written checklist. It's not extensive, but it's just thoughts from my thought process as a pilot. If you're going to do something, you got to be prepared. Anything you do in life and in business, anything, you need to have a game plan and a preparation plan. And I'll make this available on the channel. First and foremost, you have to look at the checklist in terms of, and you'll see this as I integrate it into the video, from what's called an exterior pre-flight checklist. That's when a pilot literally gets out, looks around the aircraft, makes sure all the surfaces are right, make sure the tires are good, the oil's good, the props are good. Everything with the exterior of the aircraft, you're doing this pre-flight. And then you also do the pre-flight on the interior of the aircraft. All the instrumentation, make sure everything works. Your radio works, your flaps work, your controls work, it's free and clear, all that good stuff. So how does that correlate for doing something in the 1A world? Well, first of all, one of the pre-flight things you got to look at do you look at number one as being a mental and physical state. How are you feeling when you decide you're going to go out there and do this? Are you at the top of your game mentally and physically? Or, are you just going to go drag out there just because, well, what the hell, I'm going to go, kill some time. So are you mentally and physically in a state where you can go out and do something and be present in what you're doing? Number two is the transportation. And I've seen some interesting ways of people doing this, but are you going to take a ride share to your location, wherever that might be, or are you going to take a personal vehicle? So those are things you want to think about. Pre-plan before you exit your home. Identification. Are you going to carry your ID, state or federal? Or are you going to, you can always make up the IDs and some of the other stuff. So again, what are you prepared to do to identify yourself if in fact it comes to the point that you are required by statute, you've actually done something that actually requires identification? Are you going to have it, or are they going to nail you for not having ID? And then the money comes into play. That'd be number 4 is, are you going to take cash? Are you going to take credit cards? Are you going to take bullion, Bitcoin, whatever the case might be? Are you going to be, or will you have on your person money to be able to bail you out of a situation if something happens, if you need to make a call? And the 5th thing that's important to think about is, how far are you willing to push your 1A rights? Are you willing to go as far as getting arrested and go to jail? Some people do, and that's obviously their choice. you got to make that determination ahead of time so you're mentally prepared for the consequences, because it'll mess you up. I've never been in jail. I put some people there, but I've never been in jail. And will I be prepared to go to jail? I've got licenses that require me FBI that every year I have to take fingerprints, and I'm not going to get arrested because I'm going to be traveling overseas personally, and that could jeopardize me, going to some of the countries I plan on going to. So again, personally, in my world, I'm not going to go to jail. However, I will, if I believe I'm being infringed upon, my rights are infringed upon, I'll make damn sure that that's going to be recorded, and then I can, if I need to take it to an attorney to press and push the issue of a violation of civil rights, I'll do so. I'm just going to live my life. That's what I do. Now, you've also got to think, if in fact you are arrested, and a lot of these are just bogus retaliatory arrests. I've seen that. What is the impact on your profession? What's the impact on your business or your personal reputation? If you don't care, that's fine. But, there are folks out there that have professional, accreditation letters behind their name and their careers and businesses. So again, think about this. What will the impact be of a record, either a misdemeanor or a criminal offense, be on your professional record? If you carry a gun, they always ask, have you been convicted? Have you been charged with A, B, and C when you go for your concealed weapons permits? Now, let's look in terms of equipment. Now, the next thing is, what type of recording equipment are you going to invest in to achieve your objective? Because you want to be able to capture the moment. Don't force the moment. You live in your life, and somebody reacting to you just being present with either your phone out, your camera out, that person in front of that lens is going to make the determination on what they do. You have no control over that. You're not taunting. You're just standing there, or if you're just, recording for someone who wants to see the location because they can't get out of the house or whatever. So, what type of equipment are you going to invest in? Are you going to drop some money? Are you going to just use your phone? Are you going to have a backup phone? Everybody that gets these phones, I've got 3 or 4 phones here that, I've upgraded. They're all relatively, I guess, a year or two old. So I'm going to have a couple of them on me. So you got to figure out which is your go-to phone in case something happens. You're there. And if somebody decides to smack your equipment and drops it to the ground and it breaks, well, c'est la vie, you write it off, you charge them, you get your money back, yada, yada, yada. So again, what type of equipment? That's part of the checklist. You're going to have your backup batteries. What type of gear are you going to have hold your equipment? Is it secure? You're going to have windbreak, wind shielding devices on your mics. Are you going to have Bluetooth mics? So again, think of all these things prior to going out. And most importantly, number 8 on this checklist is, do you have contact information for an attorney or a trusted legal advisor? You need to determine prior to going and doing what you're going to do in your 1A world, practicing your First Amendment right. Whatever you decide to do is up to you, but determine the entity you're going to visit or /audit. Meaning, are you going to a federal facility? Are you going to a county facility? Are you going to a state facility? I know there are people that go on public sidewalks and push and just walk down the sidewalk, take photographs of in town, businesses, signages, and all that. Determine what you're going to do ahead of time, and make sure you have everybody's used to electronic digital media on devices. If something happens, and I'm the type of guy that I'd like to have a backup piece of paper, because if my equipment fries or if it goes down, I don't want to be caught without having information to back up. So have a written set of either whatever, especially if you're going to need an attorney or a trusted legal, have that phone number readily available somewhere on your person. And this is the big one. You need to take your time to study this. This will make you or break you. This could land you in jail. This could keep you out of jail. This next section you want to definitely keep it close to your. And number 9, this is the most important. If you're going to go out and do this, are you going out on this 1A journey? If you are that type of person that says, "Hey, I'm tired of the BS that's going on, and I want to be able to express my rights," and I want to observe to make sure counties aren't taking advantage of people. I know I've got friends, the one being the angry vet up in Maryland. The VA has absolutely just caused him a lot of grief and treated him very poorly. I'm a veteran. I've been part of this VA system for many, many years, and that really just gets my goat. It pisses me off. I don't like when people that serve veterans treat them poorly just because they think they're in a position of power. And that bothers me. But make sure you study state, federal statutes relative to specific perceived violations that law enforcement will try to use against you. There's these words they throw out, these violations that are put out there. Make sure you've got your acts right. You know, most Leo's law enforcement guys, you could quote, you know, statutes and case law, and it'll fall on deaf ears. You know, they don't give a rip unless they're truly in tune. And there's a lot of them out there that are in tune, and they really are out to serve the public and not abuse the public. And there's that small handful of guys out there that are power hungry and just say they don't care what you say. You're the bad guy. We're going to take you down regardless. So, you know, treat that as it will accordingly. Now, as you go out on this journey, your 10th pre-flight item is, do you have any GIS boundaries outlined? Meaning, do you have a paper copy of the boundaries of the easements, the property lines, and what have you, so you know exactly precisely where you are, so no one can accuse you of trespassing on private property. So make sure that's absolutely correct. Most county appraisal districts have maps that have the GIS boundaries, the property boundaries embedded, and you just go to where you're going and you can see the boundaries that are there. So just make sure you have copies of those. You can have them on your phone, but again, if your phone crashes and burns, it's best to carry a paper copy because you're pre-planning what you're doing. If you're going to fly by the seat of your plants and wing it, God bless, rock and roll. But if you really want to do this effectively, make sure you've got your bases covered. And number 11, and lastly, is have you gone to the county's property appraisal websites to make a determination who or what entity owns the properties that you plan on visiting? So if someone gives you a line of BS about, well, I own this property, if it's an LLC, you can go as far. If it's an incorporation or an LLC, you can go on your state's site that determines entities that own properties, you know, that determine the LLC. My mind just went blank what it is. But you can go to your state and search out LLCs and what have you for the state, and you'll be able to determine who owns the LLCs, who's the registered agent for the LLCs or the INCs. So this way, at least you know who owns it, what entity owns it, and if somebody tries to come out and give you a line of crap, at least you have some information you're on with to say, okay, yeah, right, we got you covered. So again, preparation is the key. Okay, this will give you an idea how to search for an entity. This is for the state of Texas. Every state is different. But we go down to the business services and go down to access entity information. And then you go down here and you hit this. In this particular case, I've got an account. And I go there and I'm able to enter the site, which I'm not going to do because my personal information is there. And then I can search for any of the entities that are out there. There's other ways of doing it as well, but this is unique for the state of Texas. And I've chosen to do this. It gets me direct. I pull up data. I can pull up filing sheets and all that. And on the document that I'm going to make available, and I'm going to put it somewhere in this channel I've got, are some of the the violations that I've heard so often. Is and you want to study this. You want to study your state statutes, your federal statutes, everything that's applicable, ordinances, rules, whatever the local people say that you're doing illegally. Be prepared so you know how to follow that rabbit down that hole to cut them off at the pass and say, wrong answer, here's your side, you idiot. Education's key, but number one, A would be trespass. There are people I've heard that say, hey, the second one is loitering. You're loitering. Well, what constitutes loitering? What is that? Make sure you understand what that is. And the most overused word that I've heard from everybody and their brother that's attached to the law enforcement community is, I've been called here because of suspicious activity. And you and I both know that's not a criminal offense. That's not a misdemeanor. That's nothing. What that might give them a very micro for a probable cause, but then there's a plus sign that goes after it that you've got to have you committed a crime, and have you been accused of a crime, etc. So just study that. Make sure you understand what makes that up. And then you'll hear people say, well, you can't use vulgar speech. You absolutely can. There's no law that says you can't cuss. Other than Ponte Vedra, Florida, they were trying to outlaw that on signage and what have you, and that was all knocked down with some guys down there that called them on the carpet and said, you're not going to take away our rights of free speech. Understand what it takes to be detained. What's that process? What are the steps that lead up to a lawful detainment and an illegal detainment? Understand that in the state you're in. Also, how about...
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, you got some ID on you real quick?
What's that? Is that a gang sign of some kind?
Identification.
For what?
The post office called said that you're taking pictures and stuff there.
To identify. That's the next thing. Do you have to identify? No, you don't. Now, you need to look at every state has their own nuances. If you're carrying a weapon, there could be exceptions to the rule. I'm not an attorney, don't play one on TV. So you need to understand what is presented in your states on the failure to identify. State statutes, obviously look up on the federal statutes, then go as far as the county ordinances and what have you. Another popular term I've heard also out there that's used as a violation is you're prowling. Okay, what's that mean? What's a prowl? What am I doing? That's just that's just BS. Or another one I've heard out there as a potential violation was just invasion of privacy. Yeah, right. Again, if you can call BS and say, show me that in the law and we can move on from there. And another real popular one is disorderly conduct. What constitutes disorderly conduct? What are you doing? If you're in there getting loud and disrupting business, is that disorderly conduct? You need to know specifically what your rights are. There are some people that go out there and push the hell out of it. That's their choice. But personally, you need to understand what makes up the components that lead up to, quote, the disorderly conduct. Another thing you want to be...
February the 2nd, 1753.
Federal Protective Service, Department of Homeland Security, this is Jessica on a recorded line. Do you have an emergency?
Hey, Jessica, I do not have an emergency, but this call has been recorded. I want to report criminal activity that happened.
All right, what address?
Let me pull it up here. It was at the immigration office in Jacksonville, Florida. South
I need an address because we cover about 18 states. So you have an address for me?
Give me 2 seconds and I'll have it for you here. 4121 South Point Boulevard in Jacksonville.
I'm sorry, that was South what?
South Point, P-O-I-N-T, South Point Boulevard.
You said Jacksonville?
Correct. I'll give you the zip if you need it.
Nope, that's fine. Your name and your title?
My name is Lana, and my title, I'm part of the media, so it's with the J-Town Press.
It's assault. If someone comes up and pushes you, slaps your hand, slaps your glasses off your face, whatever, does that constitute an assault? So be real familiar in your state what components make up an assault. And again, it's always good to have an attorney and run these ideas by, say, if my camera's out, is my camera in this state that I'm in an extension of my physical body? And if a guy touches me, pushes me, is that an assault? Now, I've heard, there are times when people will spit at you. Is that assault? I believe it is assault. But you need to determine that in the state that you're in. Next thing we're going to be discussing is called the freedom of movement. And it's found primarily in the privileges and immunities clause of the Constitution. If you are preventing a law enforcement officer physically from moving from his location to another, you're getting in his way, no, that's obstruction because you're physically obstructing. If there's a canine deploying from a vehicle, preparing to do a vehicle search, and you are close enough to hinder and prevent that canine from deploying, you'll get bit, number one, most likely. Number two, you could be charged with obstruction. Now, if the Leo in turn or somebody of authority or whomever gets in front of you and blocks you from moving forward, then the privileges and immunities clause comes into play because that person is obstructing your freedom. Another was freedom of movement. Now that's not a violation per se, but that's something that could be, you could push saying you're blocking my freedom of movement to move, traverse, walk, whatever. Another thing you want to be aware of also is citizen's arrest. Can you effectuate a citizen's arrest, and how is it done? What is required? And I recommend, one of the things I forgot to put in the beginning of this is, if you're going to do this, go out with a partner. Make sure somebody's got your back, so you always have two viewpoints. Cameras don't lie. People lie. You can't fake somebody doing something on a camera unless you're really good with CGI. So again, understand what makes up a citizen's arrest, how you can effectuate that, and what happens in order to allow you to use that citizen's arrest to take somebody that has assaulted you. And the other thing that's really commonly called out there is the officers will say, "You're obstructing me." Well, in some cases, there are physical obstructions where you're blocking, the movement of a Leo to go to the front of a car to do a, field sobriety test, or you're interfering with a canine that's getting ready to do a drug search. I have read some statutes that physically speaking and taunting and asking questions in a loud manner in some states actually constitute obstruction. So you need to understand what obstruction is, and does it apply where you're at. So understand those components. And there's a hell of a lot more I know. But again, these are good things to think about as you get ready to go out on your journey and do your thing. So I hope this has helped, and we're going to press on and move on. I've got a 3-page PDF, and I'm going to put a link in and show you how you can get it. You're free to use it and what have you. I'm not giving you legal advice. This is just how I view. If I was to go out there and do this as a, quote, profession, I practice my free rights every time I go out. So, where I'm at is where I'm at. But there are people that literally travel the nation, and that's all they do. They go test the mettle of rights. Well, hey, if that rocks your boat, go for it, man. There's a lot of channels out there that do that. Where are you going to do it? What's your game plan? So if you make that determination of what you're going to do up front, you'll be good to go. All right. This is the Flying Order, and I'm out of here. You guys have a great one. God bless America, and God bless our troops.